Welcome everyone back to the A4S Summit. Today we are focusing on nature. Our economies, livelihoods and well-being all rely on nature, and nature's resilience is being severely eroded, as His Royal Highness touched on in his opening remarks earlier this week. Biodiversity is declining faster than at any time in human history. And from an economic perspective, a financial, a business perspective, as well as, of course, for us as human beings, there are serious consequences. So action fast is needed. I'm delighted to be introducing our first speaker today, who is going to share some of the insights from the work that he's been leading, commissioned by Treasury in the UK, to explore the sustainability of our engagement with nature and how we can transform the kind of decisions that we take to enhance our collective wealth and well-being and ensure that we are protecting nature for all of our futures. So I would like to welcome Professor Sir Partha Dasgupta, the Frank Ramsey Professor Emeritus of the University of Cambridge, who is going to share some insights from the Dasgupta review that he has led for the Treasury. Welcome, Partha.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited to speak on this occasion. It's a subject which is very close to my heart. I've worked on the economics of biodiversity in one way or the other for, golly, it's nearly 50 years now. But the subject is very, very hard. And I'm also naturally slow. So it's taken me time to understand the amount that I have understood. And the review that you spoke about, you referred to, gave me an opportunity to put together my understanding of humanity's relationship with nature. The review is independent and global in reach. But the nature of the beast, that is the subject of biodiversity, requires you to go beyond the macro, the global, down right to the level of communities and households. So you have to move from the very small and detailed to the very large and aggregate. Now, the scientific evidence is now unequivocally clear. We are destroying natural world at an alarming rate. Yet our economies and well-being all fundamentally depend on nature. We rely on nature to provide us with food and water, produce oxygen and regulate our climate and disease. Put simply, nature is our most precious asset. To date, most discussions about environmental financial risks, and that's the part that I'll be focusing on here today, have focused on climate change. However, left unchecked, current trends in biodiversity loss and broader natural capital depletion have potentially significant economic impacts, be it local water stress or increased global prevalence of zoonotic diseases, such as what we are experiencing today. It is imperative that economic and finance decision makers understand the challenge we face, and we all should applaud Accounting for Sustainability and His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales for inspiring action and driving forward the fundamental changes we need across the global finance and accounting community. At its core, the review provides a unified framework that understands biodiversity loss as an asset management problem. And it's not a deep insight, although unfamiliar insight, because we are all asset managers. Individuals, households, firms, and financial institutions through their spending decisions, manage their assets in line with their motivations. And of course, by assets, I should now make clear, I mean three fundamental forms of capital. Produced capital, such as roads, buildings, ports, machines. Human capital, education, health, we are familiar with these terminologies. And now natural capital, And often I'll be using natural capital synonymously with nature and the biosphere. It won't make a difference. These three types of capital assets, in conjunction with abstract forms of capital assets, such as institutions, culture, together form the productive base of our lives. Collectively, however, we are failing to manage our global portfolio efficiently. In today's economy, we run down the stock of natural capital to the point of depletion. And it's dangerous because it is widely understood that doing so would reduce the economy's productive capabilities. Yet we are continually depleting vital ecosystems like estuaries, forests, mangroves, and the biodiversity that make them productive assets. Global capital accounts, particularly the form that has been published by the United Nations Environment Programme a couple of years ago, reveal the extent to which we are depleting our natural assets. Since the early 1990s, globally produced capital per capita globally has broadly doubled. So there's been huge accumulation of produced capital. And human capital per capita, per head, has increased by over 10%. But the stock of natural capital per head has declined by nearly 40%. So it gives you a fairly good physical grasp of the extent to which we have, on the one hand, accumulated the assets that we are building and accumulated the ones that Mother Nature has given us. The accumulation of produced and human capital at the expense of natural capital is what economic success has come to mean for many people. But that view and the practices that is encouraged has meant that for several decades, our demands on the planet have outstripped its supply. So it's not just that we are consuming a lot, but we are eroding natural capital through this overshoot. The continued degradation of natural assets gives rise to risks in terms of output losses, supply chain disruption, and loss of potential new sources of products and services, such as medicines and other products. These risks are exacerbated by the nonlinearity of ecosystems, which means that nature's response to degradation is deeply unpredictable. For example, reducing forest area by half may not only reduce the functioning of that ecosystem, but also cause a dramatic change in the water cycle. Technically, the goods and services Mother Nature offers us come in complementary form. Degrade one, and there's a risk that another one will be degraded too. And yet, intuitively, most of us have been educated to think of substitutability. If one degrades, one resource declines, there is another one to pick up the slack. And that's a very wrong conception, as ecologists have now taught us to realize. Degraded ecosystems, because of these nonlinearities, is the technical term, but intuitively it means that they can shift to new states at what are known as tipping points, a very commonly used term. Such tipping points and regime shifts mean that changes to the productivity of ecosystems and the quantity and quality of the services they provide can be both abrupt and long-lasting. With time, we may learn that ecosystems are even more valuable than we now assume. For example, the world's ocean is home to a vast quantity of unknown genetic diversity, but only an estimated 10% of marine species have been described to date. And of course, ocean biodiversity provides opportunities to discover novel genetic resources, for example, for their use in antibiotics. This additional worth is known as an ecosystem's option value, a common finance parlance. In other words, there is a value in keeping our options open, which means they're even more valuable than we might think they are. But in order to craft effective policies, we must first understand the root of the problem. Nature's worth to society is not reflected in market prices because so much of it is open to all at no monetary charge. And much of nature is not only mobile, we know that, it's also silent and invisible. the effects of many of our actions go unaccounted for. And that is extremely important for us to appreciate, because it means that no amount of institutional tampering or novel forms of institutions can handle our relationship with nature in a balanced way, because many of the disruptions that take place cannot be traced to those who are responsible. Nature is silent and invisible. The solution, however, starts with understanding and accepting a simple truth, that our economies are embedded within nature. We are not external to it. Doing so helps us to see that our economy is bounded, which in turn reshapes our interpretation of what constitutes truly sustainable development. To engage with nature, we need to change how we think, act, and measure success. Firstly, we need to address the imbalance between our demands on nature and its supply, and improve nature's supply relative to its current depleted level. On the one hand, that means conserving and restoring our natural assets, and on the other hand, it means reducing our global ecological footprint. Technological advances certainly have a role to play, but we cannot rely on technology alone. We have also to restructure our consumption and production patterns. And new technologies often have extremely unpleasant, unintended consequences. Secondly, we need to change our measure of economic success to guide us on a sustainable path. While GDP is indispensable in short-run macroeconomic analysis and management, it does not account for the depreciation of assets, including the natural environment. Mainstreaming natural capital accounting would serve as a critical step towards inclusive wealth, which accounts for all our assets, including natural assets, as our measure of progress. That is, we should be measuring wealth of nations and the global economy in the way firms to measure their balance sheets. As of now, nations don't produce balance sheets, they produce income expenditure accounts. Over 80 countries now have environmental economic accounting programs, and the UK has been one of the first to publish comprehensive natural capital accounts that are consistent with UN standards. One should remember the founding father of economics, Adam Smith, wrote a book titled The Wealth of Nations. He did not publish a book called The GDP of Nations. Thirdly, we must transform our institutions and systems to enable these changes to take place and are sustained. In particular, the global financial system will be key to ensuring we engage with nature sustainably. Finance plays a crucial role in influencing both our demands on the planet and its supply by, for example, facilitating investment in capital assets, channeling financial flows to different real economy activities and technologies, and increasing measurement and disclosure of impacts on natural assets. Disclosure is extremely important. The citizen will wish to insist that firms disclose what they're doing in their supply chain from the first to the end, to the last, because there are no prices to inform us of the relative scarcity of goods and services. So this disclosure insistence is really very important, and we citizens need to harp on it. Corporate natural capital methodologies are beginning to emerge from both within the private sector and through government frameworks, such as the one produced by the United Kingdom's Natural Capital Committee. While still nascent, these combined with private sector initiatives such as the Capital Coalition's Natural Capital Protocol are making out the path ahead to make comprehensive natural capital accounting easier. But there is still more to be done. Individuals and businesses alike now face a fundamental choice. We can hide away from the risks associated with deteriorating ecosystems and continue down the path where our demands on nature far exceed its capacity to supply, or we can take a different path where humanity's engagements with nature are not only sustainable, but also enhance our collective wealth and well-being. I should say that at its core, the invisibility, mobility, and silence of nature leads the review to conclude that ultimately it will be we as citizens who will have to be judge and jury of our own actions. We cannot rely on taxes, subsidies, controls, and so forth imposed by government or communities to monitor our behavior because many of our activities are undetectable. So the solution, in some deep sense, lies in our willingness to be educated on the workings of nature. In short, we all ought to turn ourselves into amateur naturalists. Thank you very much.